Happy Friday, socialites, and welcome again to the best damn social club in the universe. I am your host, Jedi ASU, and thank you, as always, so much for spending a part of your Friday evening with me and my guest. Going to be an exciting conversation. Actually, very thrilled to have this chat today. It's actually very relevant, and we're going through. It's going to be good. So, as always, make sure you pour yourself a drink, sit back, relax, and let us continue to get social. Today is Friday, April 9th in the year of our Lord 2021. Hopefully you had an excellent week and hopefully your feet hurt because you did kick so much ass. My guest today is Aaron Hernandez, Director of Sports Law and Business Programs at Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law at ASU. And I've been practicing that one all day, so sorry for stumbling on that one, but it's actually going to be an exciting conversation, and I hope you are thrilled to be here as well. Aaron, you are part of the stream, sir. Happy Friday, my man.
Hey, Rob, thank you so much for having me. And don't worry, it's a mouthful, so it takes a couple of times to practice for
That's
sure.
quite all right. It's like for me that just, usually my titles are one or two words. So, that's why I'm like trying to get used to all that. So welcome. So as we were pre-gaming, you are in the office, so I can't thank you enough for staying a little late, but being part of it as well. What building are you in and what floor are you on?
We're actually downtown. So the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law is on the downtown Phoenix campus.
Okay.
I'm on the 5th floor here, and as I was walking over, I was a little concerned because some military jets flew over, and it's always disconcerting to see military jets flying around, anytime recently. But then I realized, they're probably doing a flyover for the game.
That's right.
We're not used to anymore after this last year. So happy to be in the office. Happy to be on the show. Thank you so much for having me, Rob.
Absolutely. And cheers to everyone in the chat. Andrew Taylor, always happy to see you from the town down south. But I'm glad you're able to join us in part of the chat. And as always, everyone that is joining us, please make sure you feel free to post your questions there in the comments. We will do our best to answer those as well. But one of the things is that our mutual friend, Eric Menkes, he mentioned it to me. It's like, would you like to talk about, name, image, likeness with one of our associates? I'm like, I absolutely would love to. And so that definitely started a wonderful back and forth between us. And so it's so relevant right now, given kind of the lull in how the football season was and everything else, but it's been percolating for a while. Right. And so I wanted to jump into that kind of talking about the history, right? When did we really start? When did this all really start? And I think we did some conversation on there as well, but just wanted to share, where did it all start? Right. When did this how happen?
Yeah. And thanks to Eric for putting this together. He's been a wonderful friend here since I've moved to Phoenix. Also wanted to thank our executive director, Glenn Wong, and actually a good friend of mine who helped prep me for this interview, who's in the compliance ranks. He just took a new job at Appalachian State. His name is Brad Boswell. He's their new senior compliance administrator. Brad, if you're watching, thank you so much for helping me out with
from
this.
From ASU to ASU then.
That's right, yeah.
Now, where did you come from? Where were you before ASU, by the way?
So I actually spent 7 years at the NCAA. I was in the football development group in enforcement. And so for 7 years, my main client was the Big 12 Conference. And additionally, the American Athletic Conference, Conference USA. And eventually it kind of morphed into a more national role. And I left in 2019, got here in November of 2019, and a happy Sun Devil ever since.
But that must have been wild dealing with being able to interact with all those different conferences, though.
Oh, for sure. You meet a lot of interesting personalities, great people, wonderful people in football. I think a lot of our football culture in college gets a bad rap. You hear about all the bad actors. There's so many good ones. I have so many wonderful friends who supported me in my career. And so college football a wonderful thing.
Excellent. Well, I'm
But
developing something on the side, so I'm actually going to swing it by you for your opinion, but we'll talk about that later.
for sure. So your question about name, image, and likeness,
Yes.
how it started, and really to step back, the
Okay.
NCAA it's an acronym for National Collegiate Athletic Association, which seems simple, not profound at all. But a lot of people forget that the NCAA is not this standalone entity. It's actually a membership services organization.
Okay.
And so the people who control the NCAA and its apparatus and all the rules that it makes are actually member schools. So I worked at the national office in Indianapolis, and people always are a little surprised by this, but I had nothing to do with rule creation. I had the least amount of power ever in my career to influence any sort of rule that the association decided to pass. It's really the member schools who make up that entity.
Okay.
And as part of that entity, there's this very long and arduous governance process on how they pass rules. And I'm sure you've seen, or maybe you haven't, seen the NCAA bylaws. But there's a separate book for each division, 1, 2, and 3. And these rules are created over time through this long, laborious process through the schools, through the member schools. They get together at convention, they propose rules, and they're passed again at a very, very slow pace.
Real quick question though, you were there what year to what year?
2013 until 2019.
I'm trying to remember if you knew my uncle. He was a head statistician for football, basketball, and baseball. His name was Gary Johnson. I don't know if that name sounds familiar.
Name sounds very familiar.
Actually. Yeah, so he was with the NC2A as a lead statistician when they were in Kansas City. So even before the move. So that's how I was familiar with the NC2A because of him, right? And stuff that he kind of shared with us. So that's kind of obviously the bylaws were just something that, like you said, is something that is a lot of reading, but I didn't know there was actually one for each division. That's actually interesting as well.
Correct.
So I didn't mean to interrupt. So go ahead. So you have all those bylaws and you have the governance to go through. And so now it takes.
And largely one of the reasons that this process is so arduous and so intensive, literally right now we're talking about, the saying it takes an act of Congress. An act of Congress is actually moving quicker than the NCAA process. Because the NCAA has such a diversity of institutions, the small D3, very low budget institutions, those athletic departments are under the same umbrella as Ohio State, and they might be in a different division with separate rules that pertain more to them, but largely, they're all in the same organization. And really, I don't know if you know how the NCAA started way back in the day.
Go ahead.
It was actually because of college football. Early 1900s, the wedge was used pretty popularly in kickoff returns, and people were dying at this ridiculous clip. And Teddy Roosevelt got college presidents together and said, "You either need to clean this up, or we're going to clean it up for you."
Right.
And so they banded together. They created an association. I can't remember what the original name was, which eventually became the NCAA. And so it started with safety, and it eventually morphed into largely what I think a lot of the rules govern is creating competitive equity between those member institutions. And so we get to NIL. And this is where NIL largely comes in the Division I NCAA bylaws. So for the purposes of this conversation, let's focus on Division I. Let's not take D2 or D3 into account. And really, there's a bylaw. It's actually 1252 is the site. Again, thanks Brad Boswell at Appalachian State. But the bylaw basically governs advertisements and promotions after becoming a student athlete. And it essentially says that as a student athlete, you cannot use your name, image, or likeness to promote a commercial product or service. And I honestly don't know the history behind this bylaw.
Yeah, that is curious. Okay.
But my guess would be, like most of the bylaws, there was some concern for competitive equity among members. This is part of the NCAA definition of amateurism, which we can get into later in the broadcast.
Right.
But also there's this idea around all these bylaws. If you look at their history, the NCAA Division I manual, anyways, that's what I'm most familiar with, was not put together holistically. It's not like a bunch of minds got together and they thought everything through. And there's this very cohesive group of regulations that are just seamless. Really, it's piecemeal. The best example I can give of this, if you remember a couple of years ago, when Jim Harbaugh was running camps all over the country, and it really upset a lot of football coaches that he was uniquely using the camp model to recruit on Michigan's behalf.
Right.
Well, pretty quickly, there was a bylaw addressing this loophole, I guess, that a lot of his competitors saw, because they didn't want to do this recruiting. They don't want to run these camps, and so they shut that down. You'll find a lot of rules like that over time were created because of these very, very specific instances of time, and they're more anecdotal than they are cohesive. Right. So I wanted to give that as context for getting into NIL, because I think it's important to know.
I think that's a brilliant way of, because again, it's always thinking that there's something that is there that the NC2A can move on, and it's something that's structured and they can go in, like you said, giving one an idea of not only how are these rules approved, right, but how, from a historical perspective, how they've kind of, for lack of a better word, bolted on because they saw a leak, right? So it's like, okay, let's put something here, let's put something there. And so that's actually very, very interesting, and actually even more, it makes NIL even more fascinating, right? Because again, this is such an encompassing type of, player benefit, but also, are they still able to be amateurs, right? And how does it affect the NC2A, but also how does it affect the schools? So I mean, everyone's just, again, myself included, before we started researching for this, everyone's like, it's the death of the NC2A, but it's not, I don't know if it's going to end it as an organization, but it's definitely a monster issue beyond, like you said, just setting up some bylaws.
Absolutely. And when you look at this bylaw in particular, and it's easy to do this across the manual. Again, this was not a manual that was put together all at once. When it started, it was about that big, and now it's like about this big, with just these things that have been band-aided over time. Right. And I didn't look at the legislative history of 1252, but it's clearly an old idea. And one thing to remember with this bylaw, I assume it was passed quite some time ago.
Right.
In part of the defining of what an amateur is. Amateurism is defined by the NCAA as a private association, and they can do that. They can define what an amateur is, and this was part of the line in the sand that they drew on an amateur. And really, at the time, if you think about this, if you're passing this bylaw, let's say in the 1980s or the 70s, it's pretty clear that somebody who profits off of their name, image, or likeness as a collegiate student athlete isn't looking very amateur. They're looking pretty professional. Yes. I would argue. If you in the 1980s, if you're getting enough notoriety to have some type of deal where you get compensation for your name, image, or likeness, your name, image, or likeness is probably pretty tethered to your athletics ability within that university.
Right.
One thing the drafters of this bylaw could not have anticipated is that actually several student athletes have a platform and a likeness that's totally and separate apart from their athletics likeness now. And so you see it all the time now. Again, the drafters of these bylaws didn't take TikTok or Instagram into account.
YouTube, whatever. It's almost like George Washington's or telling Thomas Jefferson, take into account laser guns. It's
right.
How could you even comprehend the technology? So, okay.
For sure. And so you end up seeing some of these things and how they become antiquated because I don't think the drafters of this bylaw would probably have even considered any other sport, any non-revenue generating sport, any of those athletes even having the ability to have a platform to have their own name, image, and likeness that could stand alone and totally apart from their athletics name, image, and likeness. There's this great story about texting. It was a recruiting bylaw. For the longest time in football, you could not text recruits. And when I was at the NCAA, it was one of our
this. Go ahead. Yeah.
It was one of our least favorite bylaws because we had to process so many texting violations. And we pleaded with the American Football Coaches Association, can you please get rid of this bylaw? And it was part of this antiquated view on texting. There was a couple of major coaches behind keeping the rule on the books for football, where they said, we can't text these recruits because they incur charges. They incur, whatever, a 25-cent charge per text, and they can't afford that. Well, obviously, that was a very, very old idea.
Absolutely.
And it just stayed ingrained over time, and you'll find this a lot in college athletics. It's hard to get people to move along with the times who are power brokers in this industry.
It's funny too. You even say that even back in the dark ages in the 1900s when I was in college, right? The internet was at a per minute charge, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's like, hey, coaches, don't email these kids because they're it's going to cost them 15 cents to get this email. So it's almost like you said, it's almost the same thing. And who knows, like you said, anticipating what the technology is going to be in the future, if it's even going to be that way. So being able to be as flexible. And that's actually a very interesting point. You had to go to the coaches to say, let's kill this bylaw. It wasn't the NC2A saying, we're going to do it. It's like, okay, you guys got to help us make it happen.
Correct. Yeah. And that was the case with a lot of bylaws, actually. Okay. And again, it's hard to get that coordination because, one, you're talking about a group of people or organizations that just don't like to change all that much. Status quo is usually better than messing around with change because you don't know what change brings. And also, it's easy to blame the NCAA for these things, right?
Okay.
If you're at the local level of a campus and your coach accidentally texts a recruit, again, that bylaw finally changed, thank goodness.
Right.
But your coach accidentally texts a recruit. It's really easy to say, "Oh, coach, I'm sorry, got to write you up. It's the NC2A's fault." They're the ones that Aaron's over there in Indianapolis writing the book, just figuring out ways to mess us up,
right?
Which couldn't be further from the truth. And I think a lot of people don't get that concept.
Yeah, exactly. Someone that's trying to, it's like an AD that's coming down on a coach or whoever it is, a school compliance guy coming down on a coach for doing something. He's not going to say, yeah, my predecessor and your boss's predecessor all did this. And because of them, that's why you can't. And it's like, so who am I supposed to be upset at? Whereas if it's just a big cloud of NC2A, then it's just like it's easier to be able to be upset at them. But that's but that's a brilliant way of kind of not humanizing it, but making sense of, look, the NC2A isn't always out to get you, right? Especially when it requires involvement from the member schools to make all these bylaws a reality.
Right. Largely that audience that's aggrieved is actually in a bigger position of power or has more sway in the game than the people at the big building in Indianapolis do. So, which is fascinating to me. But,
Having been on the inside, I'm sure it was, right? And it's for me having this conversation, it definitely is eye-opening for me as well, because then I can actually think about it. It's like, and it's like, no, it's logically, it's not just the NC, it's not top down. It's actually, I don't want to say it's a democracy, but it's the people that are driving the laws.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Excellent. Right. And so that's actually, again, what that's going to be. And it's kind of turns everything that, I thought about the rules and name, image, likeness and everything else, because now it's really not, you have it from so many, I mean, my mind is everywhere because I kind of want to talk about it, right? So you gave us some background, right? And so now it came about, how this all really came about. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of people making money off their likeness under the table as much as they could, until it got exposed, like some of the jersey sales, like the Johnny Manziel, going all the way back to Brian Bosworth and who know wherever else, right? And even SMU, right? So I mean, it's been around. And so, but it really, and it's because it can make money off it. But now it was the Ed O'Bannon case in 2009. Is that when it was? That's really when it became to the forefront, right? It's always been kind of talked about, but that's really was a case that brought it up to the forefront, right? And it was, what was the situation that Ed O'Bannon saw that kind of said, what, this is not right?
Well, actually, even before that,
okay,
in 2004, Jeremy Bloom sued the NCAA.
Okay.
It was because he couldn't profit off of his name, image, and likeness.
He was from where? What school did he go to?
Colorado. He was a standout at Colorado. He ended up playing for the Eagles for a little bit in the pros.
Okay.
And it's an important court case for NCAA law, Bloom versus NCAA.
Okay.
Where the courts largely defer to the NCAA, because it's a private association, and you'll see this across all private associations in law. Courts don't like to get into the business of a private association. This is why Roger Goodell can do whatever he wants to do, and it's because you have a bunch of people that said Roger Goodell can do whatever he wants to do. I agree to be part of this league, right. And you'll see, even when he reaches like some pretty crazy conclusions, courts will largely say, hey, the NFL is a private association. The NCAA are largely the same. A lot of their internal rules in that big rule book I mentioned are largely not questioned by the courts. What they ask is whether or not they've applied those rules arbitrarily. That's a threshold question for winning a suit. And so Jeremy Bloom was also a skier on the side, and he wanted to make money off of his skiing endorsements. Part of his court case, he said, "I'm a good-looking guy." That was actually one of his arguments, which I think is hilarious to bring that up. Right? You do you, Jeremy.
Are you saying he wasn't attractive?
Fair
enough.
But good for him for having the gusto to put it in a pleading with the court. But it was really at that point that there was at least some visibility around, why can't student athletes make money off of their name and likeness? And fast forward, you mentioned Ed O'Bannon. This was a threshold case, along with the Sam Keller case. Ed saw himself, and same with Keller, being used for a variety of ways. In Keller's case, he saw himself in the NCAA video game. And I do want to talk about one other thing. At the beginning of each year, student athletes actually have to sign a statement. It's called a student athlete statement, where they agree to drug testing, waiving some HIPAA rights. They certify their amateurism. And then they also agree to signing away their name, image, and likeness rights. And that's largely for the NCAA to promote their championship events. That was the spirit of signing away the name, image, and likeness rights, and the NCAA could use the athletes at these championship events. what I don't think was intended at the time that these statements came about was what became kind of a forced contract for these student athletes to sign, and now they're being profited off of by a video game.
Because a likeness that's in perpetuity, I guess. I would guess it's not for the duration of their career. It's like from that forever. Is that
right?
That's okay. Wow.
Right, and it was happening during their career too.
Yeah.
You know, you'd bring up and I used to play the NCAA football games.
Okay.
I went to Notre Dame undergrad. You'd bring up in the 2006 game, you'd bring up the Notre Dame roster, and that quarterback, his name was not Brady Quinn, but he had the same skin tone, haircut, number. He was from the same hometown, and I think Keller and O'Bannon saw this and said, "Now wait a second, EA is making money hand over fist here.
Exactly.
How am I not able to get a chunk of change here? This goes way beyond, I think, what they intended for advertising for championship events, for NCAA events."
I wanted to impress you. I wanted to impress you because I did some reading. So it was Judge Claudia Wilkin who saw the Keller case, and she said that it failed the transformative use test. So the transformative use test saying is like, okay, if you transformed his likeness enough, right? Let's say if they used someone that looked like Sam Keller in, let's say, a robo football league that was set in space, on an asteroid, and the field looked nothing like Sun Devil Stadium, then they could probably get away with it. But the reason she cited was that it's a gentleman that looks like Sam Keller's wearing his number in Sun Devil Stadium playing football. So it's like, I think it's not protected under the First Amendment or something like that, right?
No, I'm not familiar with the finer points of actual property.
I went too deep,
but that's largely correct. There was no confusion around who this was, and by the way, Claudia Wilkin hates the NCAA. If you ever want to sue the NCAA, go to California, sue them there, get into her court. It's been a thorn in the NCAA side. Honestly,
she's here in the Bay Area, right? She's in Northern California.
Yeah, I got to roll my eyes a little. Get in her court if you got a problem with the NCAA. But I agree with that. I actually agree solidly with that. Because that's a little much, to be having this commercial. That there's a bylaw that says the student athletes cannot promote commercial products or services once they become student athletes.
Right.
But you're letting a media company, a video game company, do that.
Absolutely.
It's way beyond the use that the NCAA intended, which is to promote their championship events. And so you mentioned those two cases. Those were a big spotlight on this issue. The other thing that happened that a lot of people don't talk about in this issue that I think probably contributes to it more than just these cases shining the spotlight is back in the early 2000s, college football coaching salaries and basketball salaries were largely not the outrageous numbers you see today.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at Barry Switzer's salary from the 1980s when Oklahoma was rolling, and he had to have been one of the most noteworthy coaches in the nation in the 1980s, Barry Switzer and those Oklahoma Sooners. He was only making about $1.25, And at some point in the early 2000s, I think it was right after Nick Saban won the national championship with LSU. The highest paid coaches at the time were Saban, Bob Stoops, and there's somebody else I'm forgetting. This is back in 2003.
Maybe Bobby Bowden. No, that may be too late. Go ahead.
But Saban's agent at the time put a clause, an accelerator in his contract that said, my client needs to be the highest paid coach at all times in the nation.
Okay.
And so what ended up happening is this particular agent represented a number of college football coaches. They put the same clause in all their contracts. And so a growth of salary that kind of was a slow trend line up went like that pretty quickly. Yes. And now we're at the point we're at now where you could do a survey of all the states in the United States and see that the highest paid public employees are usually either the head football coach or the head basketball coach
yes.
at whatever the flagship state institution is. And really, somebody had mentioned to me, a prominent person in the membership, in the NCAA membership, had said, name, image, and likeness was not a thing back in the 80s because these student athletes, one, they didn't have the platform, but also they weren't really worried about inequity because the coach that they played for really didn't make all that much more than what their scholarships were. And now these salaries have ballooned to a point where if you're Trevor Lawrence, I mean, if I were Trevor Lawrence, I'd be a little upset that Dabo Swinney makes as much money he does, and I don't. I'm recognizable. I probably get a lot of people in South Carolina to buy whatever brand of clothing I came up with, or I'd certainly be flirting with shoe companies to have them endorse me. Now the flip side is there's
he can't even get. Oops. Like I don't know if that was me or something happened. I don't know if it was my computer or my internet connection, but anyway, yeah, it's like I can't even. It's back to the Trevor Lawrence. Like I can't even be given cookies, right, or a cupcake or a meal, right, because I don't want it to be looked upon in some weird way, right? But my coach has tens of millions of dollars, right? Because I'm playing so well. So, and I think that's again absolutely the case with all of them, right? I mean, obviously separate from the cost of education, because I mean that's definitely a whole different thing. But I mean, it's just yes, there's equipment and there's everything else, but like you said, if you're there working hard and you're making millions for your literally for your university, not being able to take advantage of it obviously is definitely something that is I guess it's frustrating, but again, like you said, it's the inequity as well.
For sure.
That's what, that makes a brilliant sense. So then that was the other one. And I read about another one that was a gentleman from Rutgers that actually kind of went directly after EA for, I think, actually doing that as well. So I think that was like those were, I guess, the three of the four major cases that were going on. So now this is real interesting, right? Because now that we have the history, we know how we got here, right? But now, it's really about where are we now, obviously, and then I want to talk about where we're going in the future, right? Because you've seen the NC2A has proposed something, right? But then now California, Colorado, and Florida, I think those are the only three states that actually have passed. Is it legislation? Am I using that word right? They passed legislation to be able to honor that. And Florida is happening in a few months, right? Colorado, and I don't know why it's taking Colorado and California. It's a couple of years, but like Florida's like, okay, July 2021. And so it's just like, it's up upon us. Right. So, but like the NC2A tries to pass something, but then like they're trying to work with the Congress, but then you have something at the state level. So, I mean, how is that how do I say this? I kind of brought this together, right? You couldn't get everyone to wear masks nationally. So how are we going to get a consistent, kind of platform that's going to protect student athletes consistently, right? I think that's where we are right now, right? How are we going to get to that point? Is actually and if I'm missing steps, like if that's step 3,000 and there's a few other steps that we, please, bring me back. But that's kind of what I was just kind of thinking about.
No, you hit it on the head. And by the way, I've got my ASU mask here.
Excellent.
I'm a mask wearer.
Southern cheers.
It's a mess, is what it is. This is what happens when the government gets involved in the business of private association. So largely, this is a political play. Like most of these congressmen and women really have not spent the time studying all the intricacies of NCAA law, how this will impact Title IX, how this could have tax implications for the student athletes. That's all boring. What's really sensational and what they want to deliver to you is, oh my God, look at this big nasty organization profiting off the backs of these kids. When you look at it in a vacuum and you eliminate all the other things, which we can talk about in more detail, that's what they're after. And in a time, again, this is my editorial, but in a time where pandering works better than ever as a politician, this was some low hanging fruit. It was just like how when I was at the NCAA, just how it was easy for our member institutions to throw us under the bus, like it was our fault. It's pretty easy for if you're a state representative to make this very simple argument that skips a lot of steps to your constituency and get something moving, and you win political points as a result. Right. So what has happened is everybody has jumped on this hate train, and they've log jammed legislation at the state level, and it's been kind of a race to who can get theirs passed first. And what happens is now it's put member schools in quite a bind. If you're a member school in Florida, what is that going to look like? I have no idea.
Absolutely.
I really don't. And Congress is working on this. And by the way, this is a lot of the NCAA membership's fault, because when you punt enough times, if Congress is moving faster than your regulatory apparatus, you didn't see the writing on the wall here. This is a lot of your fault as an association, and they could have controlled this back in 2013 when Ed O'Bannon was arguing his case, and same with Sam Keller. The NCAA could have largely controlled this. They could have redefined amateurism to say, hey, it's okay to profit off your name, image, and likeness and still be an amateur, because times have changed. So the bylaw has to change. But they largely didn't do that. And now you're at the mercy of Cory Booker,
Right. And again, to your point, right, it's not the black box of NC2A, right? In order to have changed that amateur definition, the NC2A would have been working with every single one of the member institutions. So it's not just the NC2. It wouldn't have been just the NC2A. It's the NC2A and everyone that's part of it to define that, right? So it's like, it's a family problem that has spilled out into the front yard, and cops is filming, and now it's just going to have to be. And now it's just exactly. It's like, and Maury's going to say you're the father, and now the NC2A and the affiliate schools are going to have to be like, all right, what is this going to? I mean, and it's just Florida's going to be quite the experiment then, because it's like not only it's all though. I mean, I don't know how many universities that are NC2A members are in Florida, but I mean, obviously, just thinking at it from a football perspective, right? You have two different conferences, right? SEC and the ACC in there, and you have all of the other ones in the smaller and everything else. And no, you have SEC, ACC, and what's Central Florida? Are they AAC?
American. Yep.
They're American, right?
You got South Florida. You got South Florida, Central Florida. Don't forget about Miami, Florida State, and Florida.
Right.
But also you have Florida Atlantic, Florida International. There's a lot of D1 schools in Florida, and this also doesn't include some of the the HBCUs. FAMU is in Florida also. So this will have a significant impact, and I would not want to be an administrator there right now. This would give me a lot of. I wouldn't know what to do. I'm sure they're speaking internally about what their plan of action is. I think a lot of them are really hoping for Congress and the NCAA to work something out before then. Otherwise, this political play is going to play out, and there will be some degree of chaos.
That's good. And again, I guess that's interesting. It's good for Colorado and California to kind of have peeled back and saying, okay, we're going to take, I guess, 3 years to figure out how in the wide world of sports to make this one happen. But it's actually, again, pulling on the internet memes, I guess it's appropriate that we get to see all this chaos come from Florida, right? And we get and we get to see all this what not to do from Florida. But I think it's just like you said, it has to happen. But I think it's exciting. And again, it's one way. It's exciting to see what else is going to come about because it's only a few months away, and so they really have to. I mean, it's just like, and this may be part of the go forward conversation, but it's like, who's going to track all this, right? Because it's like, okay, we have to set up all these rules and bylaws and so on. Okay, but then who's making sure everyone's adhering to it? Who's tracking? Who has a sponsorship or an agreement with what? I mean, and it's just one of the things that I read as well. It's like some people are saying, yeah, it should only be some 80s. It was what was it? athleticdirectoru.org or .com. It was one of those sites that I was researching. Some of the athletic directors were saying, either I want it all or not at all. And then some of the responders said only for basketball, football. And I'm like, how is that? I mean, it's like, how is that when you have, strong women's basketball teams that are doing so phenomenally well, right? That they're just as just as recognizable, as popular, as famous as any of the others, as the other ones. So, that's another concern. How are you going to take care of all that? And I don't even know if is there even conversation how to do all that?
Well, what's discouraging is that there's athletic directors who are even discussing that possibility, because that means they're not, I think, well acquainted with Title IX and how important Title IX is to university education. Another thing that you mentioned, Rob, that just sparked something in my mind is if you're in Florida and this is happening, right? Think about all the other member institutions. Clearly, if your student athletes can profit off their name, image, and likeness in this state, what does that do as a result in their standing in a private association? What happens? So if you're recruiting against the University of Florida or Florida State or Miami, and you're in Georgia, where this is not legal yet, it seems like this would be a substantial recruiting advantage to pitch to student athletes. And so the law of Florida would make it impossible for these institutions to abide by the agreement that they're in a private association. So if you're one of those other members of the association, do you even want a Florida school a part of your association anymore?
Wow.
Because there seems to be an inequity. I don't think it's to that point. That's probably a nuclear option, and I largely think this will be hashed out nationally because it has to be. Otherwise, there'll be too much of this chaos. But it's something that, again, when the government gets involved in the regulation of the internal workings of a private association, there's these consequences that come as a result.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the whole. I mean, it's just like we thought. I mean, looking at SMU, right, and the rogue boosters, right? I mean, not only have to dealing with rogue boosters, within Florida, but now you have a set of schools that don't even have to negatively recruit. They can just say, look, you come to the U and you're going to make money. What do you want to do? You're going to go to Alabama. You can, and now you're really you're now competing more against the cream of the crops, right? It's like, okay, you want to go to Bama and earn a national title, or do you want to come to the U and immediately take care of your image, your likeness, start making money, and this will set you on beyond, yes, a national title is fantastic. And yes, if you come to Florida, you absolutely can do that. But now we're giving you something that no other school, Ohio State, wherever it is, that can't. And so, I mean, it's just like you said, I had the same exact thought, right? It's like, how is that going to absolutely blow up recruiting, right? I mean, almost if they pitch that, and it's like everyone's going to go to the Florida schools because they just want to be able to take advantage of that until everyone else does. And like you said, I think that's the nuclear option. Just no, you can't be part of the conference anymore. But it almost feels like there would be some governmental legislation, like, all right, you gotta stop this for a while until we figure it out, right? And that's just, again, like Paul Hornstein, he just said that, and here's what I mentioned. It's fun to think about the chaos, but it's really something we don't want to do because it just turns into so many more headaches for so many more people out there that have to deal with that. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is like we're on this. It's such a weird transitional time, and there is so much chaos because there is so much to figure out. But how much of a priority is this in Congress, given that we're still kind of fighting a pandemic and trying to recover from all this and everything else? Is it still getting a lot of attention?
I mean, surprisingly, it is. And again, it's because it's low hanging political fruit.
Okay.
It's really weird to me. I watched a Senate hearing. My professor from Marquette Law School actually was somebody who testified at this Senate hearing, and
oh, right on. Okay,
it was odd to watch. It was in the middle of lockdown, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm watching this Senate hearing on name, image, and likeness in college athletics, and these congressmen. Cory Booker has been pretty sensational.
Has he been the big one? Has he been like the lead?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
It's kind of like part of his brand, I guess. Whatever. And he's up there just raking them through the coals. And and by the way, this old system, I don't actually totally agree with. I think there's some merit to opening things up and letting athletes profit off of their name, image, and likeness, just given the time. But it was so odd to me to watch this Senate hearing in the middle of a pandemic. You're right. Also in the middle of like all the social stuff that happened last year.
And really? What time of year was that?
It was summer.
So it was with all the protests and oh my goodness, yeah, that must have been wild.
All this stuff going on, and they're talking about this. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's an extracurricular activity at a school. This is not even. People forget college athletics is not the main business line of educational institutions, and we could talk about the longevity of college athletics and how there's some thin ice to skate on here, given the recent Alston case that's been heard before the Supreme Court and things like this. Where
the Alston case is, again, just for point of clarification,
it's an antitrust case against the NCAA for limiting what student athletes can earn while they're student athletes, and that's very, very clunky nutshell of it. But all these things given together, people forget about the business of college athletics and really how college athletics just makes up a very tiny part of the budget for an overall university. And most of these departments lose money. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, please. That's all right. There's really no structure, and we'll get back to it. But no, that makes actually very cool sense to understand that, because you always hear, some schools subsidizing the athletic department, or like you said, because of COVID, right? Some athletic departments had to cut programs because they weren't getting that subsidy. Because again, like you said, the main engine of the university is the academics, and that's the actual engine, right? Obviously, athletics is arguably the more visible part of a university, but it's not the absolute revenue generator. It might be for a handful of schools, but not majority.
Yeah, the best that you can hope for is largely to break even. I haven't done the recent lookup of the schools. I would do this every year at the NCAA. Around 20 to 30 of them make some money.
Wow. Okay.
It's not a lot, they've covered their costs, and they're even able to make some money where they give it back to the academic side of the institution.
Okay.
Largely, as you mentioned, the academic side subsidizes the budget of athletic departments.
Right.
And that's tough being a
Okay.
university president when you're charging certain amounts of tuition. They go up every
Right.
year, and this is not your main line of business. And I would question at some point, at what point is it becoming too costly? It already seems pretty costly for you
Absolutely.
read.
Yes.
If you have to start paying student athletes, what can of worms does that open up?
Absolutely.
Where university presidents will have to make business decisions. So again, it's purely speculative. But
Wow.
something that I really worry about is just general deregulation of college athletics and the amateur model, not on its principles, but for business reasons. It could be an ice age for college athletics if you're not a participant in football or basketball. I could certainly see sports getting cut. A lot of opportunity for women that have come across over the years through Title IX. The way you stay.
Wow.
The way you stay in compliance with Title IX is proportionality, and
Right.
you could probably fund two sports to remain in proportion with the two men's sports that are really generating revenue.
Exactly.
But just
that's
very
wild
different
thought.
look. And a lot of opportunities cut. Again, that's purely speculative. We don't know what will
No,
happen.
of course.
Here. But
that's an incredible thought. I mean, it's just, and to your point, right? Everyone, you always hear about from people, how in the heck did they pay Coach X, tens of millions of dollars after they fired him? And it's like, well, it's because, the university fund, it didn't come from the athletic department, it actually came from the university itself because they're an employee, right? So that's where that money came from. So, I mean, obviously there's a larger fund there, but still as a university president, it's a business decision to say, okay, from a budget perspective, can I afford that kind of a ding for that long, right? And again, it's not always, like you said, that's a brilliant way. I'd never thought of it that way, that it's the funds aren't always coming from the athletic department, it's coming from the university. And that's clearly, they have a lot, university has a heck of a lot more money to be able to have to deal with that. And again,
and these Rob, these athletic departments and how they manage some of that money has fairly come under some scrutiny and some criticism. Not to throw our friends in Tucson under the bus here, but they made substantial cuts to.
And that's okay. We do that in this show.
All right, good. They made substantial cuts to their athletics department.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that work in that athletic department. Luckily, they were not impacted by this, but it was a number like 40 people who lost their jobs. And I guarantee you, these people aren't making millions of dollars, right? But they cut them from the books with the justification of, hey, we got to get current because of coronavirus and our financial situation. But then the university proceeded to fire their head football coach.
Mm-hmm.
Pay him a massive buyout. So they're paying him not to coach right now. Now they're paying another football coach to be doing the same job. And I don't know, I haven't read into their basketball coach, who we became well acquainted with at the NCAA. I don't know if he's getting fired for a cause or not. But if he's not,
interesting.
That's another buyout that they're funding. And at some point, as a spectator or a stakeholder in the University of Arizona, you look and you say, "What? Well, hold on. Why is Susie, the secretary, being fired, and she doesn't have health insurance anymore?"
Right.
But you're paying Coach someone how much to not coach anymore, and now you're paying this new guy how much to coach? Like what?
Absolutely. And some of the outstanding lawsuits, the unfortunate lawsuits from the cross country and everything else. And so it's just, there's a lot of money going out. That's like, how and why, like you said, if someone that's just there that just wants to do a good job day in, day out, like you said, doesn't have a job, doesn't have insurance, and is worried about it, making ends meet now, right? Because again, you have two people, because you fired two people in a span of, 7 months or whatever it was. I mean, it's just like if both of us, God forbid, we got fired, it's like it'd be a blip, right? But if you fire 2 people at the coaching level, then you have to deal with it for years, unfortunately.
And by the way, Rob, you'll hear this justification from universities when they do this, or their athletic directors is, oh, no, don't worry. That money that we're using to pay him to buy out his contract comes from a different pot. Don't think of it as the same pot. And it's honestly one of the least convincing reasons that I've ever heard. I always roll my eyes at it. This happened at the University of Texas this year also. Same deal in the middle of a global pandemic when people, I'm assuming a lot of these people who got laid off didn't find work right away. And in the middle of a pandemic didn't have health insurance, or likely didn't have health insurance. Gosh, that my heart breaks for them. And so
for sure,
something needs to change with university finances and how these athletic departments conduct themselves with regard to coaching salary in particular.
And that's just, again, like you said, and then adding on top of it, it's like, okay, the university, and again, who is it, the university or is it the athletic department that has to manage and pay and treat the student athletes as employees light, right? Or 1099s, almost like a contractor, right? Where it's like, okay, you have a contract with the university, you're going to school and you're earning and we're paying for education, but you're getting taxed or not taxed at all, but you also have someone else, you have to be your own LLC or whatever it's going to have to end up being. So and again, the more you pull it, just the more and more it unravels as to, okay, how are we going to deal with this now? Obviously in the future, right? We can see the end state is like universities are thriving, attendance and games are being played, fans are happy, student athletes are, doing well academically, financially, they're establishing their long-term, but just getting there. I mean, that sounds, like I said, that feels like step 10,258. And I mean, we're still in 2.5. I mean, we're not even taking full steps. Like, it's just like decimal steps to get there, right?
So, Rob, what's really popular is, and you'll hear talking heads in the media do this a lot, it's really easy to want to do surgery on the tumor. And this tumor that we're doing surgery on right now is NIL. We also talk about athlete compensation. There's all these issues that regularly get brought up that, again, if you listen to like a Jay Billis or a Stephen A. Smith, they get really fired up about and why this needs to change. And it makes no sense that it hasn't changed. And when you look at it in a vacuum and you eliminate all those other legal issues and all the business considerations and all the other student athletes that impact, it makes sense. And their argument becomes very, very effective. One thing the NCAA is very poor at is telling their story. Became a real big point of frustration for me when I was there. But their arguments make a lot of sense in a vacuum. If I were just to give you the facts, hey, Trevor Lawrence makes $0 off his name, image, and likeness right now. He makes nothing beyond his scholarship when he was enrolled at Clemson. And Dabo Swinney makes this much money. Well, yeah, of course that's got to change. Of course you want to change that. But what they don't like to do is get into the boring details of all this tangled web that's weaved around it. And so all these issues come together like blood vessels over the tumor. And there you have to do some weighing on how you're going to do this surgery, because you can't cut too many blood vessels when you're doing surgery.
And especially, and even then, where is the tumor, right? I mean, if it's in your brain, if it's a brain tumor, there's a hell of a lot more than just, the blood vessels. But if it's, it's like, oh, it's a growth on, my forearm, then it's okay. That's a complete different tact, right? But it feels just like, it like you said, it's a tumor in an extremely sensitive area that if you go in and brute force and, we're going to rip this one out, unfortunately you lose the patient, which is, not only the NC2A, but also, college athletics. It could truly, if it's done poorly, I think that was a brilliant analogy. You said it would just be an ice age. it would just, okay, like everything, it's like some schools had to were worried about the pandemic and they had to cut costs, and it's like, okay, now we don't have all the programs we were offering. But it's like, okay, it would be even worse if it was mishandled. And I think here's something, and that I didn't even think about this one, but given everything that you shared, what would be one of those absolute worst case decisions someone could make that could send us into an ice age? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It certainly does. I think if the NCAA loses the Alston case,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are thinking that they will. I actually don't think they will.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting. Okay.
uh, I think if anything, it'll be kind of a tie. But if the NCAA truly loses the Alston case, and there's this idea that capitalism reigns in college athletics, uh, you'll see capitalism reign up to a point.
Right.
And that will largely determine, universities won't be able to fund swimming and diving. If you're a swimming and diving athlete, you're done.
Yeah.
You're absolutely done. I don't know of any swim and dive team in the country that really makes money. The best you can hope for is covering your costs. If you're a gymnast, you're done. If you're a track and field athlete, you're done.
Yeah.
You largely will have to be on a football team or a basketball team. And if you're a young woman, it's kind of a toss-up. It's what the university decides to remain proportional for Title IX.
And it depends on where you're at. Tennessee, it's going to be women's basketball. Someplace else can be softball. It just, where are you? Right. That's
right.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
And being compliant with the finer points of Title IX, which I'm not an expert at, but okay. I think that would be the worst case scenario. Even worse, which some university presidents have alluded to this. They've said if we have to start paying student athletes, we're just not going to do that. And really, this is where the power is.
Okay.
If you look at those university budgets, again, even ASU athletics is just a blip on the radar of the university budget. It makes a lot of financial sense if you're continuing to hemorrhage money just to shut down shop and not do this anymore.
Yep.
And even though, as you mentioned, athletics is the front porch of the university, there's some benefits to it. There's measured benefits. I don't know if you've heard of the Flutie effect. The Flutie effect essentially is, Doug Flutie hits that Hail Mary. There's a big application.
Everyone rushes. Yeah. Okay.
This happened to Loyola Chicago a couple of years ago during their Final Four run. If you remember Florida Gulf Coast, same thing happened with them.
That happened actually. So my son was a Cub Scout, and so we spent the night on the USS Hornet, which is
great.
An aircraft carrier here on the Bay Area, and it's docked, and we did that. And so this one gentleman gave us a tour, and we kind of started talking with him, and he eventually told us the next day, because I had all my ASU gear on. It's like, yeah, I went to the other school because I loved basketball. Right. So it was right after their 88 first Final Four run. So he's like, oh, okay, I love college. I'm going to go there. And he's like, I got my degree, but I didn't have a great time. But that, like you said, that's interesting. The Flutie effect. If you're winning, people are going to go.
And there's a measurable effect to it.
Yeah.
I mean, however good your athletics department does financially, it will never scratch the surface of you getting more applications and enrollment, especially if your university is a bigger scale. Right. And so there's a tangible effect to having a good athletics department. And the Flutie effect proves that. The problem with the Flutie effect is that it's very fleeting, and I guess other people would argue, well, college athletics actually does a promotional service for the school that the school just can't replicate, and it's intangible, it's immeasurable. Right. And that's hard for me to buy, because the Ivy League, as you know, the reason they're called the Ivy League is because they were the sports powerhouses back in the day. Right. And at some point they decided, hey, we kind of see where this is going. Let's not go the way of
Okay.
now Power Five institutions. And if you look at the largest university endowments in the country, it's largely those guys. There's a couple of public universities.
Yeah.
There's a couple
Okay.
of them that have football programs that do well. But, I don't even know who Harvard's football coach is, but I know that
Right.
their university endowment and their reputation is just second to none.
It's
You know,
it's in the
um,
billions.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you look again at what drives university revenue, um, it's research and
Right.
it's education, it's tuition. Um, you have this loss center. How much loss are you going to take on it before you say no more?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. No, that's definitely it. And so this one came up, and this is completely unrelated. And it's a quick question, and we'll continue on. You were familiar. You were mentioning the endowments for Harvard and everyone else, and so having been at the NC2A, were you familiar with the operating costs of all member schools at NC2A? Like, did you know how much the athletic departments made or did or didn't have?
Not like formally. I would read the same, USA Today article that
Okay,
that
got
everybody
it.
else.
And I was
It's
just curious because,
it's largely put together on their public financial statements as
right.
nonprofits.
And because that's the other thing too, is like with like Stanford and USC, they're private, right? So that's never public. That's never, it's estimated, but it's never published. So I just was curious if that was ever something that you guys were. And again, Paul Hornstein said it as well. Stanford and USC, those are other ones that have endowments at the university level that make a lot of other things, possible. So, but yes. So everyone, this is Aaron Hernandez, Director of Sports Law and Business. Did I get that right?
Very good.
Yes. Good. And so he is joining me. He is my guest today, and we've been talking about name, image, and likeness, not only from the history perspective where we're at right now, and some of the history from NC2A, how the NC2A works, which was fascinating and kind of really, the only word that's coming to me is humanizes the NC2A, not because they're not this big scary box in Indianapolis. It's that they are driven by the member institutions, ASU and the other conference memberships from other conferences that are actually driving a lot of the bylaws. So it's not always necessarily the NC2A coming after you. It's just, look, the universities worked with the NC2A to set these up, and now again that's what they have to adhere to. And so that's again what's making this name, image, likeness literally so hairy. So it being the top of the hour, as always, we do go ahead and take a small bio break, refresh our drinks and everything else. But thank you so much for everyone who is in the show, who is in the chat as well. So what we're going to do is we will take a break. We'll go ahead and Aaron, if you'd like, I'm going to go ahead and remove you from the stream, but we will be back at 8:20, so 20 minutes after the hour. So, sir, go ahead and get yourself something to get some more water, bio break, whatever you need, and then we will talk to you in a couple minutes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And to everyone else, thank you again for being part of the show and spending some time here on a Friday night, Friday afternoon. Again, hopefully you are doing well. As always, from last week, we have a 5.5-hour show with Gus Farwell and his beautiful wife, Claire. Hopefully you were able to watch some of that. And so, brilliant show. And so we're going to actually have a couple more guests coming in the coming weeks. So always make sure that you are watching out for those announcements on Twitter and Instagram as well. However, make sure we will be back in 10 minutes. Make sure you go ahead and do that. Let's see. Do I have a timer on here? Let's see. No, I'm not going to do a 30-second timer. Anyway, we will be back in 10 minutes. See you at 20 after. Refill your drink, bio break, and all that other stuff. Maybe even catch something to eat. And we will see you in 20 minutes, everyone. Talk shortly. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully, you had an excellent break. I actually got something to eat, so hopefully, there is nothing in my teeth for the remainder of the show. But as always, Aaron, you're back as well, my friend. How's everything?
Great. Thank you so much for the break.
Excellent. Good. No, absolutely. I needed it as well. Got to catch up with everyone they're watching a movie in there. I'm like, okay, I better stop watching this. So, so we were talking about, again, everyone, this is Aaron Hernandez, Director of Sports Law and Business at Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law at ASU and College of Law, not School of Law, College of Law. And so we're talking about name, image, likeness reviewed, historically, where the NC2A comes from, how their bylaws are made and so forth, and how name, image, and likeness is actually going to impact and actually change much of that as well. And so there was one, and for the remainder of the call, for the remainder of our chat, right, there's going to be, the future vision, right? But one last thing about what's going on right now. You mentioned a case that's going on right now that it's like they won't, it's they is it O'Neill? I can't remember the one that's going on right now where you said it's like it may end up as a tie. NC2A may not lose, but what is that case again?
The Alston case.
Alston case. Thank you. And so you were saying it was like at a very high level, it was an antitrust type of case against the NC2A, and so that's still going on right now. But with that, right, in the near term, let's say that one moves along and it does end up in a tie. What can we expect to see not only from the NC2A, from Congress, and even from member schools, in the near term, especially in Florida, because this stuff is happening in July?
That's a good question. I do not know.
Okay.
If I were in Florida right now, I'd be having meetings with all my compliance folks to decide how we're going to regulate this or monitor this on an institutional level.
Right.
It's just such an awkward place to be, where your rules are different from the rest of the association that you're a part of. So really, I think what the NCAA wants and all the members schools who make up the NCAA is just some direction from Congress, so that there is a uniform law that's passed, so that there isn't this resulting chaos. Which I think there's been enough visibility around this that there's at least some appetite to get that passed.
Okay.
You had mentioned earlier in the broadcast that the NCAA had proposed some legislation surrounding this, and they actually walked back that proposal based on a letter from the Department of Justice.
Okay.
And hopefully they've been working on that nonstop, and how to incorporate the feedback that letter provided so they can get something passed uniformly across the board. Because again, I don't know how you prepare for that. I really don't.
It's such a big problem that has so many different, just so many permutations and so many considerations of what to do. Right. It almost feels like it has to be one fell swoop at one point in time. It's almost like you said, the NC2A has always bolted stuff on. Oh, here's a leak here, here's a leak here, and then let's bolt everything on. Whereas now it just has to be it has to be the best first attempt large sweep, right? Because it can't be just like, okay, let's take several. It's just like it has to be all encompassing first time out, right? It's going to change. Obviously, it's going to change and grow, and there's going to be mistakes and everything else, but at least there has to be something all encompassing at once. It's like, okay, it's not even a version 1, it's probably like a version 0.7 right here. Let's figure it out, right? So, and I think that's really what it is. But now going forward, like the future vision, right? We talked about what the nirvana is, right? But what are some of the other things, not near term, but more long term? Let's say we're talking about, let's put it in the next 2 years, right? When Colorado and California come online. I don't know if anyone else is going to pass legislation, but what do you think we can see in the next 2 years? What would you like to see, I should say, within the next 2 years before Colorado and California and say anyone else decides to come online with this?
What I would anticipate is that Congress does act
Okay.
and they pass some uniform law
Okay.
because much like Cory Booker's brand that he's made for himself, he'll be able to say, I'm the one that came and saved these poor student athletes, and now they can make money off their name, image, likeness, and you'll get that from a ton of senators. They can take that back to their constituencies, argue that very easy point, and win political points. So I do think and the NCAA wants this now because unfortunately they didn't take control of their own issue and they let the government get involved, and now they're kind of behind this 8 ball where they need Congress to step in to provide some uniformity to supersede all these individual state bills that are passing. I think that will happen. And here's the most frustrating thing as somebody who loves college sports is that it really should not have come to this. Poor legal strategy by the NCAA and its membership back when Ed O'Bannon raised this issue has resulted in this coming to roost right now. Because if you really think about it, this is just what I think is going to happen. I think college athletes are going to be largely disappointed at their earning potential in a free and open market based off of their own name, image, and likeness. And this is the example I always give. I was at, I asked everybody, what's the best ending in recent memory to an NCAA championship? And the answer is by far the ending to the 2016 NCAA men's basketball championship between Villanova and North Carolina. Iconic. Villanova. Well, I was at the game, by the way.
Cool.
Wins on a buzzer beater. It was a crazy atmosphere there in Houston. We thought the guy who pushes or the gal who pushes the confetti button pushed it too quick and they're going to get fired. But it was just this magical moment that is forever an icon or forever galvanized in NCAA history, right? I cannot pick out of a lineup the guy who hit that game-winning shot. And I don't remember what his name is. That was a pretty iconic moment. If you think about the left tackle, pick your SEC school. They're probably a 5-star tackle, well known in their hometown. Think about the one at Alabama or LSU right now. I have no idea who that is. And would you be able to recognize him without his football helmet on? Would you be able to recognize him without the A on his chest, or in our case, you got a little Sparky on your chest? I think that their own earning power is not. It's probably a little overinflated right now, or at least what we're predicting will happen is overinflated. Now, there's always the Trevor Lawrences. There's the Baker Mayfields. There's the Manti Te'os. There's the Johnny Footballs. That's a great example of somebody who could have really made big money nationally off their name, image, and likeness. But a lot of these other folks, I think, are going to be a little disappointed on what they can earn by themselves without a tie to their university. Again, because I'm the university protecting my marks and you're earning money based off your name, image, and likeness. You need to take that pitchfork off your chest.
Because there's always, to your point, right? It's like there's always these. I think the NCAA is saying, you can absolutely earn money, but you can't be wearing your uniform. You can't have the logo. You can't do any of that. It's just you, right? And again, like you said, and you're not going to have someone trying to find that defensive tackle's jersey in the Salt Lake City airport at a 5 p.m. You're not, right? And it's like no one's going to. So I think that's the interesting thing too. And that's actually a brilliant way, because again, everyone's promising all this money, but like you said, once you get it, it's like, okay, you're going to be lucky if you're making, it's very interesting. It's almost like the promise of being a YouTuber or an influencer, right? It's like you see everyone talking in this and that, but are you really absolutely truly making that much money? And There's a very select few that are, but not everyone is. That's a brilliant point. I didn't even think about it that way.
And the membership, the NCAA membership, kind of drew a line in the sand here on their concept of amateurism as it relates to name, image, and likeness, and the corollary fear, or I think why they've been paralyzed on this is that there's this thought that, well, essentially this legalizes what bagmen have been doing for years,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Now you don't have to sneak around. You can just to get the 5-star to come to your school, you can just make this happen out in the open. And in theory, I think that works out. But I was an NCAA investigator for quite a while, Rob.
Okay.
And I met some of these bagmen, and it's amazing how much of there's some shame in trying to bribe a kid to come to a school when you're a grown man,
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that if I'm a prominent, but let's pretend that I made a bunch of money.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I was gonna pay off a kid to come here to ASU. I don't know if I want that in the open.
Oh, absolutely.
And also the difference between funneling money to recruits under the table, incognito, and you associating your brand and your name with it is far different. Remember, you're dealing with a population here whose frontal lobes are not fully developed. And you're putting brand reputation, you're tying it to people that could largely be explosive in what they do on social media, or
of course
do something in the dorms that's pretty nuts. I don't know if this again, NCAA membership will say, well, this just opens it up to you don't even have to worry about bagmen anymore. They'll just be able to do it out in the open.
Right.
I don't know if that's convincing to me, because if I were, and maybe I'm in the minority here, if I were a brand, I would think long and hard about who my spokespeople are.
Of
and
course.
17, 18-year-olds are probably not
absolutely
I'm investing a ton of money in. In the case of basketball, the NBA's rule on the draft, which essentially creates a one and done situation at the NCAA level. Also you're talking about time. How much time do you have to invest in these athletes to really pay off for your brand? And some one and dones, it could be a matter of months. For football players, are you really going to be investing a bunch of money in them while they're riding the pine behind All-Americans,
or God forbid they're injured?
Right. That too.
Yeah, that whole thing too.
And so, Rob, I think that their earning power is not going to be what everybody thinks it is. I think that fear that NCAA institutions have about this, again, personally, I don't think that will come to fruition. And largely it's frustrating because I just don't. I think it's going to be a very little bang, And why was there all this legal posturing and court battles and all this conversation around this when you could have modernized this rule several years back, taken control of it?
Right.
And I don't think amateur athletics looks all that different with a football player being able to go to the car dealership and sign autographs.
Absolutely. I mean, it definitely does not impact anything else that you're doing, right? You're just, and again, especially if you're able to make sure they're on the up and up and they're representing the university well, and you have that as established as a rule. It's like, look, you're going to show up, you're going to go, ready, presentable, there, rather than, okay. And again, this I think is the same case, for pro athletes, right? If you make an appearance and you're intoxicated, that's going to that again. That's just definitely, like you said, a reflection on the university, who you're representing, yourself, and long time as well. So, man, yeah, that's actually very, very interesting. I absolutely love that, because again, the way you put it about the earning potential of anyone, right, outside of the very visible, famous, well visible players, right? And again, that may be part, and again, that's going to be a shame too, because that's going to introduce a whole different inequity. Why is this guy making so much more than
Yeah.
me? And it's like, then that's going to be,
Imagine being an offensive lineman in those locker rooms. I guess
yeah.
they'll have to eventually deal with it if they make it to the NFL, but that's not a fun conversation or
Oh,
dynamic
absolutely.
to
Yeah,
navigate.
because you're there and it's like, and again, that especially, and again, having talked with Kyle Murphy, former right tackle for ASU in the 96 squad, that relationship with your quarterback is so key. So if you begin to resent your quarterback, how are you really going to truly, absolutely build a solidly gelled championship team if you're resenting each other because of money? Wow.
Yeah, it's tough. It'll take some creative coaching. That's for sure on how to do that.
Yeah,
Rob,
exactly.
I do think there is an opportunity here
Okay.
with name, image, and likeness where, again, there's all these instances you'll see from the recent past where somebody wants to make money off their YouTube channel because they have this unique
Right.
cooking there was a kicker, I think, from Central Florida recently,
Yes.
who I think he had posted a video. Somebody had wanted to sponsor him. He took the money. They rolled him ineligible per NCAA rules. Can't do
Yeah.
that. And it begs the question. If you're a lax player, or if you're the kicker,
Mhm.
for a mid major, is your likeness and all those follows you're getting and all those potential sponsorship opportunities on a small level, is it really tied to your athletics ability? Probably not,
Exactly.
you know.
No, because his channel wasn't even related. He wasn't even like kicking the ball or anything. It was completely unrelated to the sport. So it just had nothing to do with what he was doing on a day-to-day basis, right? So yeah, exactly.
And so it makes a lot of sense for these student athletes who have talents all on their own, and now they have the platforms to do this. Again, remember, it's an old rule,
Right.
where they have followings on Instagram or TikTok that are in the thousands, maybe even millions, and it's not related to being
Absolutely.
a punter at Central Florida. Nobody cares about that. They care about these other things you bring to the table, and
Exactly.
I think there's a real market for student athletes generally who have some type of talent, unique
Mhm.
talent, or they have some type of unique following that's totally
Right.
unrelated to their athletics likeness that they could profit off of. And
Yes.
the counter argument is, well, companies will want to pay for whoever the quarterback is at your school to reach that following. And
Absolutely.
this is speculative, but I don't know if I'm following somebody because they're the quarterback of my school that I really care about most of the other parts of their life. A
Mhm.
lot of these other micro influencers, again, their followers aren't because they're the quarterback of their school. Their followers are because they're really interested in their cooking channel
Exactly. What
or
are
their
they doing
workout
elsewhere?
regimen or their yoga regimen. I think there's a
Absolutely.
lot of opportunity there, and I think those athletes should be able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I had a question about was um is the topic of how should a student athlete start preparing or have a mindset of all of this going forward, right? Because one of the things I read about is intellectual property, IP. To your point, right? Everything that they create on YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, wherever it is, if this that's their property in perpetuity. You don't want to be signing a contract that whatever you do gets signed away and someone else can take advantage of it, right? So being able to be mindful of that. But the biggest question really is, we pre-gamed about this, right? Forbes said that signing with a marketing agent may make more sense, may be the first move they do before actually signing with a sports agent, right? And so, and this may be, and if this is too big of a question, tell me, right? But how does a student athlete prepare for that? How does a student athlete start discerning to say, okay, this is someone that's good or bad, or this is a company that's good or bad for me?
That's a good question. It's tough to do
Okay.
when you're 18 to 22, right? Like
Right.
how do you go about that process? It's interesting that you mention the marketing agent that they would sign with before an actual sports agent. And in that proposal that the NCAA, Brad just told me about this last night, that
Okay.
proposal the NCAA put forth that the DOJ wrote the letter back on. At one point in that proposal, the NCAA allows for student athletes to sign with a marketing agent, which is a humongous shift from their bylaws for years.
Okay.
The NCAA had a definition of an agent that was pretty broad. There's a lot of different
Okay.
activities you could undertake to be considered an agent. And largely, to simplify the rules, largely, if you sign with an agent, you become ineligible. And
Okay.
so it was a humongous shift in this proposal, which again, just proposal, it's not legislated right now.
Right.
For the NCAA to even say that was crazy. And they said marketing agent in particular. And Brad's point was, well, how do you even know what's the difference between a regular old agent and a marketing agent? How do you even
Right.
make that distinction? It's
Absolutely.
kind of, I'm not sure. But to your point, preparation, really what you want to do is you want to hire a lawyer to have you buttoned up and to make sure that your IP is yours and to make sure you're not getting into a contract that's crazy. But here's one of the realities of this new world. Most of these student athletes are not going to be able to afford legal
Right.
representation. We cost a lot of money on an hourly basis, and they just won't be able to sign lawyers. And again, going back to my point that I made, I don't think a lot of them are going to realize these big gains that they've been told about over time. And what lawyer is going to take a case where you might get a couple $100 at the dealership?
Okay. Got it.
Or you might make a couple $100 because a startup protein cookie company wants to be eating their cookie in your Instagram post. So really, you should have a lawyer to advise you on all issues IP.
Okay.
But again, think about the demographics of just pretty much young people generally. They just won't be able to afford good legal representation. And so I didn't read the Forbes article that you did, but it makes sense that you would sign with a marketing agent first, even though that's not really the best move to put yourself in a good legal situation. You probably need somebody to just help you find these opportunities generally to begin with.
What kind of attorney should someone pursue, right? Obviously, there's several types, but I mean, is it someone familiar truly with sports law, or is it that's who you just want to pursue or reach out to if you're a student athlete?
Generally, a transactional one. If I'm imagining a deal that you're having to sign, something you're having to agree to, where you're giving some of your NIL in exchange for compensation.
Okay.
A good contract attorney can find things. Yeah, and I do this on the side sometimes. I'll look over friends' contracts who they're signing a coaching contract, for instance, and I'll go through and I'll tell them, hey, you want to look at this? This means this. It's just easier to add. And that's a very general attorney that can. And most attorneys can do that. To get into the nuances, if you're one of those lucky few student athletes who's going to be able to make a lot of money, if you're Baker Mayfield, you should definitely hire an intellectual property attorney who knows their stuff and knows it well to make sure that your IP is going to be protected.
And I think that's the key, right? Finding someone that has a reputation, that is known, that is established, right? Because obviously that experience and that reputation carries along, but you also pay for it, right? Because you don't want to be able to get hooked up with the wrong type of attorney that's new or someone that misses, because then you're doomed to even more, right? And that's always something that, like you said, it's, and you always hear about that, right? With some, oh, my uncle knows someone, right? Or, and it's like, and then you bring them in, and it's just like, and then it just becomes even a worse situation, unfortunately,
Never
for.
good.
No, it's not, because then you never know. Then you're putting all your trust, but then if you have someone that's writing it all for you, then how much are you really, or are you or are you not seeing? So that's always the thing. One of the things is that I know we're coming up at the top of the second hour, but I wanted to mention this is the whole a player signing with a particular brand, right? ASU is Adidas. But what happens if, this all happens and then Jaden Daniels decides to sign with Nike, right? That not only does that prove to be an equipment team nightmare, right? But again, how are you supposed to keep consistency in the uniform on the field, right? Or is it just, is he just wearing Nikes on his feet versus the rest of it's Adidas? And then how is Adidas? Then Adidas goes ahead and creates an ad with Jaden Daniels on there, but they just cut off his feet because they're Nikes. So it's like, more and more threads of just stuff that, I wouldn't even know how to start to not only write a law for that, but even manage it.
Well, that's something that, you're right, becomes a little bit of a nightmare, but it's been done before.
Okay.
In pro leagues.
Okay.
NASCAR has to deal with this all the time. Big events have to deal with this all the time.
Okay.
And a good example to mention, or to go back to your analogy, Emmitt Smith, when he was in the NFL, he was sponsored by Reebok, and
right.
This was before the entire league had a shoe apparel contract. Each team would be outfitted by different shoe apparel companies. The Cowboys had signed a pretty large, record-breaking at the time deal with Nike.
Okay.
And their uniforms were outfitted by Nike. Everybody had Nike shoes on. Emmitt would be wearing his Reeboks during the game.
Okay.
In this case here, I doubt that Adidas has something missing from the contract where they say you can wear Nike or Under Armour or whatever else on the field. I'm pretty sure it's pretty certain about that. And so, the young man who you mentioned would probably not be able to wear his hypothetical Nike shoes for a game. He'd have to be wearing all the Adidas gear.
Right.
In which case, so you can manage that.
Okay.
But from a Nike perspective, and
right,
you have to ask yourself, well, what's the value here then? What's the value of him pushing this brand on his social channels or through some other means when the most airtime he gets is actually playing football?
That's right.
And he's going to be wearing Adidas that whole time. And that's a business decision for Nike to make. And again, not being a marketing guru, but I think that there's some significant loss of value there when you can't use him at his most at his highest exposure point.
Exactly. And actually, Paul Hornstein brought that up. It was a Michael Jordan, Nike, Adidas thing, because I think Adidas or Reebok outfitted them for the Olympics, right? But he clearly was deeply entrenched with Nike, and they said you have to wear the uniform when you accept your medal. So he had the flag draped over the logo. He still had that jumpsuit on, but he was able to cover the logo and still be true to his brand. So that's actually, again, I love the direction in which you're like, what is the value of having this? And again, that may be the entire thing, right? It's like Nike's able to sign deals with kids that are at Nike schools, right? But that also gives Adidas the ability to say, okay, we're going to sign deals with kids that are our schools, right? So it's not necessarily someone you're trying to poach someone from another school unless they're so massive that you're looking at a longer ball. But that is the key. That's been amazing. But this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I cannot thank you enough for that. And so, were there any other items you wanted to bring up or that we missed that we may not have touched on yet?
No, I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about this. There's a lot of misconception over
Yes.
over how this is regulated and how it's been handled. And quite frankly, the NCAA deserves some criticism here in how slow they moved and how badly they anticipated the legal issues to result in the costly litigation over time. And now to the point where an act of Congress is moving quicker than
Literally.
the NCAA membership modernizing a particular bylaw. That aside, the association and college athletics generally is a really cool thing. I'm a big believer in college athletics. I'm a big believer in the equal opportunity that the women have received. I know it wasn't on display during the tournament, but largely, Title IX has been just a huge win for society. And also college athletics has been a real win for society. What gets lost in here is all those little D3 schools and all those little D2 schools and the HBCUs and the water polo athletes and the swimmers and the track athletes. And, this is a pretty good thing for all those people. And anytime you go down it's easy to drink a Coke, right? And the Coke is going to go listen to the talking heads on ESPN talk about just what a terrible system that this is. What's way harder to do is eat a salad and digest all these different things that come into play for you to make a very informed decision. This is very gray. It's not as black and white as it's.
Oh, absolutely. And again, that's why I'm appreciative of you, because especially the explanation of how, not only how the NC2A exists, but why it exists and how the bylaws are actually passed and created and supported by the member institutions. Like you said, I think that's definitely, when you say it's the NC2A to blame, they drag again, not only did the NC2A drag their feet, but it's all the member schools too that drag their feet. Because like you said, if they had just recognized it early on, then it would have been a lot different conversation as we're having right now. So,
and that's why I'm at ASU now, which is #1 in innovation.
That's right. God bless it too, because absolutely, it's always a good day to be a Sun Devil. So, yeah, and as Paul Hornstein said, the talking heads on TV are morons. So what is it? They got to incite. If they incite someone to rage, then they did their thing, because then it's like, okay, how's he going to upset? They come back the next day. How's he going to upset me today?
It's infotainment.
That's what it is. So question for you. So I always ask these questions of my guests. So before we sign off, I always ask these questions of my guests. There's 4 of them. The first one is brand new, and I actually shared this with us while we were pre-gaming. So what is the coolest thing you own that's inexpensive? What do you think it is?
So I was actually, I think I'd mentioned to you, I went to Notre Dame undergrad.
Okay.
I was the drum major of the band, and
that's cool. Okay.
We'd have to whistle off the group, and one of the most iconic people in Notre Dame lore is Lou Holtz, and so I actually got Coach Holtz to come talk to the band before we played Michigan in 2008.
Okay.
And it was so cool. And we had him conduct the fight song.
Oh, wow.
I gave him my whistle because he needed to whistle it off. And it was a relatively expensive whistle for as far as whistles go. I'm not an expert in the whistle market, but at least I think this was a pretty legit whistle. And so he whistled them off. They did their thing, and he was about to leave. And I said, "Oh man, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't get that."
Oh, yeah.
So I literally stopped him, and I said, "Can I have my whistle back, please?" And Coach Holtz, in his Coach Holtz draw, I won't even try to imitate it. He said, "No, you can't have your whistle back. That's messed up. You're trying to take your whistle back." He's like, "Okay, fine, be that way." And give me the whistle. So I've got a whistle that I got back from Coach Holtz.
That's so cool. Oh, so now being a drum major, you were in band first then, I guess.
Yes.
What did you play?
I was a trumpet for 2 years.
Right on. Okay. So so I have twins, boy, girl, and so the girl plays trumpet, and so
Oh, great.
yeah, and then her twin brother, he plays trombone. So exactly. So
Well,
they're in middle school.
brains, you know?
Yeah, that's right. So it's like that's why us boys, it's like I played trombone too. So, she's able to hit all the high notes. So building on that, next question is what is your most treasured possession? Is it the whistle or is it something else?
No, it's not
Outside, and again, let me frame that outside of family, children, wife, house, all that stuff. What is your favorite? What is your most favorite possession?
Boy, it's a tough one. There's this book that a lot of friends went in on for it was my 22nd birthday.
Okay.
And they got together and they wrote some pretty amazing notes.
Okay.
And I still got that book till this day. If I'm having a bad day, I'll open it up.
Oh, that's cool.
I'll look at it. And I guess as a little larger part of that, I have this box of handwritten notes I would get while I was at the NCAA or when I worked at NASCAR. I actually have one from Commissioner Seelig from back when I was in law school.
Wonderful.
He wrote me back. And there's a lot of notes that when I go through there, it's really cool when people put themselves out there.
Cool.
Like
yeah.
I keep all of those. My brother will tell you, and anytime he tries to help me purge all my things, I'm pretty good about getting rid of stuff, but we come to a halt on the handwritten notes. So that little box is probably my most prized possession.
Very nice. Yeah, I have a friend of mine as well. He shared that as well. He has a box of memorabilia, pictures and notes and so forth. That he's like, I know where it is, and if there's a fire or an earthquake, that's the first thing I grab. He grabs it and runs out, so he absolutely knows.
That's fair.
Yeah. So next one. Share with us your most amazing experience at a restaurant.
Boy.
Doesn't have to be expensive, just has to be memorable and dear to you.
Most amazing experience at a restaurant.
Yeah.
Boy, that's tough. That's a tough question.
Because there were a lot?
Yeah. I'm not sure that this is the correct answer because I'd have to think about it more. But one that pops into mind is, quarantine was a long time, it felt like. And I treated this whole thing pretty conservatively. We got, I've lived here pretty much most of quarantine or most of this.
Really? When did you move in? When did you move in?
I got here November of 2019.
Wow. Okay. Got it.
And so largely I've been living in this world here in Arizona. And the most difficult months for sure, like everybody else, was from middle March all the way up until the school year starting. And so when the school year started, they opened up the building. I was excited to, actually get here and see people. And I went with our program coordinator for the program. She was helping me move. And I said, do you want to go outside and eat somewhere? You okay with that? We're going to be taking risks here of being in the school with all these people. And she said, yeah. Right. And there was this spot just a little bit north of here. It was a sushi place outside. And that was the first time that I had sat down at a restaurant and it was outdoors since it would have been like March 13th or something, somewhere around there. And, we had like a glass of wine. My tolerance had plummeted in all those. I wasn't one of those people over quarantine whose tolerance was going up. I was actually not drinking too much, but just being outside. We had our masks off and we were just eating. It was, again, that seems maybe a little less special now just because things are starting to open up again and we're vaccinated, but there was no vaccine at the time.
Exactly.
It was so special to forget about all the garbage of last year, and it was this moment where I remember telling Sarah, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot that there was a pandemic going on.
Yeah,
That was a great
exactly.
hour, you know. So the one that immediately comes to mind is that, but I'll do some more research.
Yeah,
And
you keep thinking about it. Let me know, because then when I get to visit you, hopefully this fall, not only do I look forward to walking around campus with you, but then I look forward to hearing some of those stories. So,
absolutely.
last one before we sign off, and so got this from Rob Lowe in his podcast. Literally, he got asked this question when he was in Vogue. And as far as I know, I've only had one guest. She was on last week that has ever been in the magazine Vogue. So, have you been in Vogue, or is I didn't
No.
want to assume. I didn't want to assume too much. So okay. So here, so I'm gonna ask. So if you had to see one of these three things, which one would it be, and why? And the follow-up question is, if you have seen one of these three things, please share your story. Okay. So if you had to see one of these three things, which one would it be and why? A UFO, a ghost, or Bigfoot?
Oh, man. So I've not, to my knowledge,
Okay.
seen any of those things.
Fair enough.
This is probably something I shouldn't admit on a recorded broadcast, but one of my phobias is actually aliens.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I hate thinking about them.
I had one for a while, so you're not alone.
Okay, yeah,
So
don't say that. I don't need you to say that. That string of words either is not cool. But I remember watching. Remember the old Unsolved Mysteries with that scary?
Yes, sir. That intro still bugs me out, man. I can't watch it after a particular hour. I'm like, nope.
Me too.
I'll watch it in the morning when it's bright light.
And when the one that really got me as a young kid, I remember being at my uncle's house watching this late at night, and it was the Roswell, New Mexico episode.
Yes, I remember that.
And just the way he talks, it's
that dude was always, man. Yeah, he just
it sends you down the spine.
It was. I mean, not only did the music get you, but I think it wasn't Robert Stack. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it could be someone else.
It was
him.
Yep.
But I mean, just the way he talked, and in the coat, and then the fog, and it's just. And some people just don't get it because it's just like when I was, young as well. And so I'm like, it still bugs me, that song. And again, have you seen the new one on Netflix, the new Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix?
No.
I haven't either, but I'm just like, I may do it just to see if the intro weirds me out, because I did it one time. I just fired up the intro. I'm like, man, that gives me the weirds.
Yeah.
But it was that episode that kind of locked it in for you. It was like, and I bet you if we're to watch it again, it's probably like, it's like lo-fi, not computer or what.
No, I watched it recently within the last couple of years, and I was disturbed for the
still. I'm
still.
gonna have to watch it, man, because I remember that episode, but I'm gonna have to watch it again. So amazing what those shows do to us when we are little.
Yeah. So I would not want to see a UFO.
Okay, so we'll set that one out. So
I would like to think that I'm a generally solid person, and I can come through the clutch, but that would freeze me up for sure.
Okay.
I think I would like to see Bigfoot.
Okay.
Because there's been it's a more exclusive group of people who've seen it. I feel like there's a lot of people who at least say they've seen ghosts, or there's ghost hunters. Bigfoot would probably be a little more special, and so that would be. And Bigfoot doesn't scare me because I also don't think that Bigfoot exists. But I think that would probably be the one I'd want to see. There's only one Bigfoot. There's plenty of ghosts all over the place.
That's excellent. Yeah, and so that's actually one of the few Bigfoot hunters per se. My dear friend Paige Denny, her grandfather was actually was actually involved with the Bigfoot Society in hunting and everything else. I don't know if he saw one, but I know that he definitely was involved in seeing that as well. So, and so there's another one if you're interested in it. Max Brooks, who wrote World War Z, wrote a book, and it was called Devolution.
Okay.
So it is about it's a suspenseful. They call it kind of horror, but it's not super gory when I read it. But it's about a group of. It was a pack of Bigfoot that actually attacked this little village in up in Oregon. So it's quite the read, and I can only read it at night because, again, I'm sensitive that way. So. I was like, I'd read it. It's like, oh, sun's going down. I got to put it away. And then I'd come up, and then I'd be like in the morning, right back at it. I mean, I read it. I devoured it, but I was just like,
wow.
Only during the day.
Okay.
What would you like to promote? What are you working on? What would you like everyone to follow you for and be aware of what you're doing, my man?
Thanks for having us here.
Always.
Yeah, and I say us. I mentioned the Sea League Sports Law and Business program here at ASU.
Yep.
If you, please follow along with us. We've got wonderful students who are going to have wonderful careers in sports. Our number one goal in our program is to get students jobs in sports, and starting with that is recruiting just some really talented, interesting folks from across the country and the world. Any support that you can lend our program, even if it's just retweeting our tweets, please go do that, and you'll see some future stars pretty early on in their careers. I've got this magazine on my little desk over here as from Sports Illustrated in the early 90s, and they talk about like all the future stars, these young athletes who are going to end up doing something.
Yes.
Ken Griffey's in there. They miss on a couple of them, but Ken Griffey's in there. Tiger Woods is in there.
Right.
That Emmitt Smith was in that special also. Our program is one of those specials, just continuing for all these bright minds who are going to do a whole lot better job, by the way, leading in sports than a lot of the current leaders that we have who put us in the mess that has and so again, these students are dynamite. Please follow along.
Excellent. No, that is wonderful. And so I appreciate you definitely taking some time out of your Friday night. So if you could please send me your address, DM me your address as well, or an email. I would love to send you a thank you, but I also look forward to buying you lunch and having a glass of wine with you, hopefully this fall, because I definitely have some trips planned for some games. So I look forward to seeing you. I'm a hugger, so so hopefully giving you a hug as well and getting to hang out in downtown Phoenix. Yeah,
well, I'm looking forward to meeting you too, Rob. And don't worry, I am fully vaccinated, Team Pfizer. So
excellent.
I'm all right with that hug.
My second Pfizer shot is on the 17th, so we will be fully inoculated together. So
great work.
Looking forward to it, man. So thank you so much. If you could actually stay on the line, I'm going to go ahead and remove you from the stream. But again, thank you for being part of this, and everyone else on the stream. Give Aaron a shout on Twitter. Actually, QUAN. I love that. Juan Hernandez. That's actually, is that something you've had, or how did you come about that?
It's a nickname that stuck in college. Never thought it would stick. Never had a nickname in my life. All my really close friends call me Quan. And so that's unfortunately, Aaron Hernandez had already been taken by somebody else.
As always is the way. And the only thing, because Quan, the first time and again, I'll sign off with this one. Quan, I first came across in Jerry Maguire. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, that's where it was. So it was for Sun Devil said it. So how timely is that? Exactly. Excellent. So thanks again, Aaron. I appreciate you. Let me do a quick sign off and we'll talk right after a moment. Yep. Go Devils. And everyone, thank you for another wonderful episode. Wonderful conversation. Thank you to everyone in the chat. Made it a fantastic conversation. A lot to think about, but also a lot to look forward to. And looking forward to having Aaron back on the best damn social club in the universe as we learn more. But as always, I love you. I am grateful to every single one of you for being part of this show. As always, make sure you love yourself and most importantly, love those around you. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful weekend. And as always, make sure that you are sharing the love and you continue, as always, wherever you are, be social. Good night, everyone.